Empire Tales. Hannibal Barca, Rome's greatest nightmare. Imagine a world where a single man, driven by a sacred oath and an iron will, brought the mightiest empire in history to the very brink of total collapse. For centuries, Roman mothers would quiet their crying children with a single, terrifying phrase, Hannibal ad portas. Hannibal is at the gates. This is not just a story of ancient warfare. It is the saga of Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who performed the impossible, defied the laws of nature, and became the ultimate tactical genius of the ancient world. The oath of eternal hatred. The story of Hannibal begins not in the heat of battle, but at a bloody altar in the ancient city of Carthage. To understand Hannibal, you must understand his father, Hamilcar Barca. Hamilcar was a man who had been undefeated on the battlefield, but was forced to surrender to Rome during the First Punic War. He carried a bitterness that burned brighter than the African sun. When Hannibal was only 9 years old, his father took him to a temple of the gods. He made the boy place his small hand on a sacrificed animal and swear an eternal oath that he would never be a friend to Rome, and that he would spend every breath of his life seeking vengeance for the humiliation his city had suffered. This was not just a promise. It was a destiny carved in blood and reinforced by years of rigorous training. Hannibal grew up in the military camps of Spain, learning not from textbooks, but from the sweat, mud, and reality of the front lines. He became a leader who slept on the hard ground with his men, ate the same rations they ate, and was always the first to charge into danger and the last to retreat from it. By the time he took command at age 26, he wasn't just a general. He was the living embodiment of Carthaginian fury. The impossible march, crossing the Alps. In the year 218 BC, the Second Punic War erupted. Hannibal knew that to defeat Rome, he had to strike at its heart. But the Roman navy controlled the seas. He decided on a move that was so daring, it was considered suicidal. He would lead an army of 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 massive war elephants across the Alps, the jagged, frozen mountain range that stood as a natural, impassable wall protecting Italy. The journey was a literal nightmare. As they ascended, the air grew thin and the paths grew narrow. Hannibal's men, mostly from warm North Africa and Spain, were not prepared for the brutal alpine winter. They died by the thousands from freezing cold, starvation, and exhaustion. But nature was not their only enemy. Hostile mountain tribes launched constant ambushes, rolling massive boulders down on the climbing columns. Perhaps the most haunting sight was the war elephants. These giants, designed for the hot plains, found themselves slipping off narrow, icy precipices, trumpeting in terror as they fell thousands of feet to their deaths. In one famous incident, a landslide blocked their path. Hannibal, refusing to turn back, ordered his men to build massive fires to heat the rocks and then pour cold vinegar over them to shatter the stone. By the time Hannibal finally descended into the lush valleys of northern Italy, more than half of his army had perished. He was left with a ragged, starving force and only a few elephants. But the Romans were paralyzed with sheer shock. They believed the Alps were a shield that no army could penetrate. Suddenly, their worst nightmare was in their own backyard, and he was hungry for revenge. The master of traps, Trebia and Trasimene. Hannibal proceeded to dismantle the elite Roman legions with a series of tactical masterpieces that are still studied in military academies to this day. His first major victory at the Trebia River showed his psychological genius. He sent his cavalry to provoke the Romans early in the morning, forcing them to cross a freezing river before they had eaten breakfast. While the shivering Romans struggled, Hannibal's well-fed and warm troops crushed them. Then came Lake Trasimene. In what remains the largest ambush in military history, Hannibal hid his entire army in the fog-covered hills overlooking the lake. He allowed the Roman legions to march into the narrow pass between the hills and the water. At his signal, the Carthaginians descended like a storm. The Romans had nowhere to run. Over 15,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered or drowned in the lake. Rome was in a state of total panic. The slaughter at Cannae, the perfect battle. The Roman Senate, desperate and humiliated, raised the largest army Rome had ever seen, nearly 80,000 men, and sent them to crush Hannibal once and for all at a place called Cannae in 216 BC. This battle remains the gold standard of military strategy. Hannibal, though heavily outnumbered, used a double envelopment tactic that defied logic. He arranged his infantry in a crescent shape, bowing out toward the Romans. He placed his weakest troops in the center and his elite units on the flanks. As the massive Roman machine pushed forward, the center line deliberately and slowly retreated, drawing the Romans deep into a pocket. At the perfect moment, the Carthaginian flanks folded inward, and the cavalry circled around to close the trap from behind. The Romans were packed so tightly they couldn't even swing their swords. In a single afternoon, nearly 50,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered. It was the bloodiest day in the history of the Roman Republic. A significant portion of the Roman Senate lay dead on the field. Rome was defenseless, its leadership was in ruins, and the city doors were wide open. The war of attrition. But here, history took a strange and tragic turn. Hannibal, despite his brilliant string of victories, did not march on Rome itself. His generals begged him to go, but Hannibal was a master of the battlefield, not of sieges. He lacked the heavy equipment and the necessary reinforcements from a hesitant Carthaginian government to take the heavily fortified city. Instead, he spent the next 15 years roaming the Italian countryside, winning skirmish after skirmish, but unable to deliver the final, killing blow. He was a general without a country, increasingly abandoned by the politicians back home who feared his rising popularity and power. He waited for a masterstroke that never came, while Rome, showing incredible resilience, refused to surrender. Zama and the end of a lion. Meanwhile, Rome found its own genius in a young, ambitious general named Scipio Africanus. Scipio had survived the slaughter at Cannae and had spent years studying Hannibal's every move. He decided that to defeat Hannibal, he had to stop fighting him in Italy. Instead, he took the war directly to the gates of Carthage, forcing Hannibal to return home to defend his people. In the year 200 BC, the two greatest military minds of the age finally met at the Battle of Zama. For the first time in his life, Hannibal's tactics were anticipated. Scipio had found a way to neutralize the war elephants by creating lanes for them to pass through harmlessly. The master of maneuvers was outmaneuvered. Carthage was defeated, and the dream of an empire was shattered. The poison ring. Hannibal's military career was over, but the Romans could never forget the terror he had caused. He spent his final years in a bitter, lonely exile, hunted by Roman assassins from one eastern kingdom to another. Even in his 60s, the Romans were so terrified of the mere mention of his name that they would not rest until he was dead. In the year 183 BC, trapped in a fortress in modern-day Turkey and seeing Roman soldiers closing in on all sides, Hannibal chose to take his own life by drinking poison he kept hidden in a ring. His final words were a stinging insult to his pursuers. Let us now at last put an end to the anxiety of the Romans, who have thought it too long to wait for the death of an old man. Hannibal Barca failed to destroy Rome, but he defined its greatness. He forced the Republic to grow, to adapt, and to become the iron machine that would eventually rule the known world. He was a man who fought for a lost cause with a brilliance that has never been surpassed in the history of warfare. He was the storm from the south, the lion of the desert, and the greatest nightmare that Rome ever endured. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this cinematic exploration of the Lion of Carthage, do not forget to like, subscribe, and join Empire Tales for more legendary stories. The past is never truly dead. It is just waiting to be told.